In a moment of silence, between two breaths, a quiet gaze touches you without a single word. No messages, no declarations, but you just know. There is a man who is thinking about you deeper than even he dares to admit. Have you ever felt like a man is somehow always there, watching you from across the room, remembering little details you forgot, silently appearing when you need him most? But he's never said, "I love you," never confessed a thing. And then you wonder, am I just imagining this? No, you're not imagining it. You've just tapped into what Carl Jung called the unconscious language of masculine love, a language that never shows up in words but always lingers in the gaze, the distance, the silence, the spaces only intuition can hear. In today's modern world where love is reduced to texts and emojis, we've forgotten this. Real love isn't spoken first. It rises from deep within the unconscious like an ancient memory the soul still remembers. Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst of the 20th century, discovered an ancient archetype that lives inside every man, the lover archetype. So what is it, Weedy Oren? The lover archetype is a living energy in the male unconscious representing a deep yearning for union, not just physically, but at the level of soul. When this archetype awakens in a man, he's not just attracted to your looks or personality. He's moved by something in you that makes him recognize himself. In other words, he doesn't just fall in love with you, he sees you as a lost part of his own soul. This isn't something you can fake. It can't be performed. Because it doesn't come from the mind, it rises from a deeper place. From a space where the eyes, the voice, the silence become sacred symbols. When a man remembers a detail you once said appears just when you need support, or watches you with a tenderness he can't explain, that's the lover archetype whispering. And here lies the paradox of our era. We've learned to read messages, but we've forgotten how to listen to the soul. Millions of women miss out on a man who truly loves them just because he never says it. But true love doesn't need words. It leaves traces in the unconscious like moonlight on water. Even if you don't see the moon, you still feel its glow. If you've ever sensed something special from a man your logic couldn't explain, if your heart has ever been pulled by a gaze that said nothing, yet meant everything, stay with this video. Because we're about to enter a deeper journey, where you'll not only learn to recognize when a man truly loves you, but you'll begin to see your own soul reflected through him. I'll show you the unconscious signals a man leaves when he's in love, even if he doesn't realize it yet. And you'll discover why he can't walk away from you, even if he never said he loves you, why his eyes seem to be hiding something sacred, and how to know, is it just fleeting desire, or is he loving you with his soul? Come with me into the world of silent signals, where real love needs no proof because it has always been there, waiting for you to learn how to see it. When a man's soul loves in silence, something mysterious happens when a man truly loves, but cannot say it. He doesn't write poems, doesn't bring flowers every weekend, doesn't post you all over his story, and yet you feel something deep is happening between the two of you. It's not fantasy. It's not one-sided hope. It's the unconscious language of masculine love, what Carl Jung once described as an ancient vibration from the deepest layers of the soul. Unconscious desire versus conscious strategy. Jung believed that modern men operate on two levels of soul. The conscious layer strategy, where he learns how to woo to text on time to say the right words. The unconscious layer, archetypal longing, where the lover archetype awakens. No strategy, no performance, just an undeniable soul pull. Her presence reminds me of who I really am, one man once said about a love he couldn't explain. Sign number 1, the unhideable gaze. When the lover is awakened, a man's gaze changes. It's no longer a look of desire. It becomes the look of a soul traveler who just found the lost part of himself. You won't see flames in that gaze. You'll see moonlight, soft, deep quiet. The kind of gaze Jung described as a reflection of the inner world where time and form dissolve. You'll notice it when you say something silly and he just silently stares like he's memorizing your entire being. You're not even looking, but he watches every movement, not out of curiosity, but because you become a symbol to him. Story: when eyes spoke what words couldn't. Nora, a 28-year-old nurse, shared, "For 6 months in meetings, he never spoke to me directly, but he always stood near, always turned his body toward me. Once I said I like the smell of lavender. A month later, a small bag of lavender tea appeared on my desk. No note, but I knew it was him. I thought if he doesn't say it, he must not be serious, so I let it go. A year later, that man married someone else, At his wedding, he looked at her with the same gaze as day one. Sign number 2, he's there even without a reason. Unconscious love doesn't need an invitation. It pulls a man toward you not because he should, but because he can't not be there. He may not be good with words, but he'll sit beside you when you cry. He won't know what to say, but his presence becomes the strongest comfort of all. This isn't just kindness, it's deep empathy from a place even he doesn't fully understand. Sign number 3, his unconscious memory stores everything about you. Jung called the unconscious a place where images live more vividly than reality. When a man truly loves, his memory functions differently. He remembers things you said casually. He repeats phrases you didn't even think were important. He knows you're sad because you blinked differently than yesterday. No one taught him to notice these things. Because it doesn't come from the mind, it comes from the soul's attempt to hold on to you. Sign number 4, his soft side begins to show. Men are often taught, don't be weak, don't show fear. But in front of the woman who awakens the lover, the wall begins to crack. He won't pour out everything, but you'll notice. He sighs thinking no one hears. He shares a strange dream with no idea why it came out. He asks about spiritual things, things he'd normally laugh off. True love begins when a man lets you witness his bare self and doesn't fear rejection. Jungian symbol, the woman as a gateway to the man's unconscious. Jung believed a woman is not just a lover, she is anima, the symbolic inner feminine of a man's psyche. When a man meets a woman and feels I've known you forever, it's not just attraction, it's the unconscious opening through you. And so when a man avoids you or withdraws, it's not always because he doesn't care. It's because his inner world is awakening and it's overwhelming. Story, the woman who left because it wasn't serious. Kelly 35 once shared, I dated Jake. He never said, I love you, never posted us online, but he showed up when I had a crisis when my mom was hospitalized. He knew I drank coffee. Black remembered a song I played once. I left thinking if he doesn't go public, he must not be serious. 3 years later, she heard he hadn't dated since, and he still kept the scarf she knitted. I walked away from a silent love because I didn't yet know how to hear the language of the soul. If you've ever loved someone through intuition, but your logic said, this isn't real, share your story. Someone out there may be living that same feeling, thinking they're alone. We're building a space where the soul's language can be heard, no proof required, just presence. In the next part, you'll discover 8 unconscious signs of a man's real love, from his eyes to body distance to future plans that quietly include you. Jung called this the sacred arrangement of the unconscious, where truth always outlives words. Keep going. The journey is long, and sometimes in darkness we find the deepest light. 8 unconscious signs a man is truly in love. If part 1 brought you to the doorway of a man's soul in love, then this part takes you inside where emotions are no longer spoken, but expressed through silent presence, unconscious behavior, and meaningful coincidences. Carl Jung once wrote, it is not the obvious things that make love real, but what seems insignificant, a gaze, silence, distance, forgotten memories. We'll now explore 8 signs that cannot be faked, signals that only appear when the lover archetype has awakened in him. 1. The eyes never lie where the soul speaks the truth. A man can learn to say I love you, but he cannot train his eyes to lie. When he truly loves his eyes, don't leave you in a crowded room. Look at you like he's preserving your soul image in his mind. Observe you in silence as if you're something sacred he dares not break with words. Jung called this the direct gaze of the anima projection, the look of someone confronting the inner feminine soul of his psyche. 2. Invisible presence, psychic presence. In the Red Book, Jung described how some people are no longer physically near us, but remain within us like a silent inner voice. When a man truly loves you, you'll feel his presence even when there are no texts, no calls. You enter a room and feel that he once stood there thinking of you. You're about to write him and he calls. This isn't fantasy. Jung called it psychic presence, a soul wave, where 2 minds blend through the collective unconscious. 3. Mysterious synchronicity. Jung once had a patient dream of a scarab beetle, and just as she spoke, a real beetle flew into the room. He called it synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence from a deeper layer of the psyche. Love can be the same. You think of him, he texts. You share an old song, he posts it the next day. You're unsure about seeing him and he suddenly appears. Not magic, just soul waves aligning in unseen ways. 4. Body language and spatial closeness. A man truly in love doesn't need to act close. He's naturally drawn to you in ways only the unconscious can choreograph. He sits nearer to you than others. Even without touching, you feel he's in your personal space. In a crowded group, his feet, shoulders, gaze always point your way, like you're the magnetic center. Jung noted the body is the instrument of the unconscious. It acts before the mind understands. Search around to 5, he remembers the smallest things. When you are the woman he loves, his brain begins storing your details without effort. How you touch your hair when anxious. A random quote you mumbled when sad. Your Monday morning coffee habit. You never reminded him, but he remembers. Not because he's trying, but because you become an anchor in his memory system. 6. Talks about the future, softly, naturally. A man in love starts mentioning the future with you gently woven into it. He shares where he'd like to live and asks what you think. He talks about a trip and says you'd love it there. He opens up about a dream and you're already a part of it. No big promises, just subtle blending as if his inner world has already saved a space for you. 7. Ancient instinct protectiveness without words. When in love, a man returns to an ancient instinct, protect what he treasures. He quietly cares about your feelings, senses when you're tired before you say a word, gets tense when someone hurts you not loudly but unmistakably. Jung called this the guardian complex, when the soul senses something sacred that must be shielded from the world. 8. Consistency over time. Finally, the truest sign is not a single gesture, but time and consistency. True love doesn't appear then vanish. It doesn't confuse then overcompensate. He shows up not because he's free, but because being near you matters deeply. No drama, no flash, just presence quiet and steady like water carving stone over time. These signs can't be seen by everyone because they don't live on the surface. They come from another frequency, one you must be still to feel. Jung once wrote, "The soul doesn't scream, it whispers in the wind. Only the still can hear it." And you, if you've read this far, you've likely heard that whisper before. Have you ever missed a love like this because it didn't speak in words? Share your story in the comments. You may not be alone. Thousands feel what you felt and are just waiting for one voice to say, "I see you." We're building a space where feelings are honored. No need to be right or wrong. Just be honest with your heart. In the next part, we'll dive deep into the symbol of the lover archetype. How does it operate in a man's unconscious? Why do some men freeze when they meet the right one? What makes a love like that unforgettable in his soul, even if it never becomes real? Keep going, because this journey isn't about chasing signs. It's about awakening a deeper truth that real love is a living symbol waiting to be recognized. When the lover awakens the silent war between Eros and Logos. In our modern world where logic is worshipped like a supreme god, there's an ancient force quietly rising every time a man truly falls in love. Eros, the principle of connection of emotion of the inner life. Carl Jung called this the moment when the lover archetype is awakened, not as a role to seduce, but as a living energy rising from the depths of the unconscious, pushing a man into an irreversible journey, the journey of becoming fully human. The lover is not an ideal boyfriend, but a primal force. In Jungian psychology, archetypes are not traits, but deep-seated patterns filled with ancient energy. When the lover awakens in a man, he doesn't just feel attraction, he sees the woman as a long-lost part of his own soul. "I don't just see you, I see myself in your eyes." This is not romantic fantasy. It's the profound effect of anima, the feminine part of a man's psyche, activated through a real-life encounter. When Eros awakens love or storm, Eros is not just sex, it is the subtle electricity that connects soul to soul. But when Eros becomes too intense, it's no longer gentle. It creates inner chaos. The man becomes anxious, obsessed, confused. He feels, "I shouldn't feel this way," especially if he's already in a relationship. But the more he tries to rationalize it, the more powerful Eros becomes. A man once wrote in his therapy journal, "I love my girlfriend, but I dreamed about my coworker 4 nights in a row. Not sexual dreams, but dreams of a strange familiarity, as if she's something I once lost." Jung called this the projection of the anima, when a man unconsciously places the image of his ideal inner soul onto a woman in the outer world. Though it creates deep inner conflict, this is not betrayal, it's a confrontation with the immature part of his soul. When Logos resists Eros, logic retreats from the battlefield of the heart. We teach boys, be strong, be logical. So when a man feels too tender, dreamy, or quickly attached, he doesn't feel loved. He feels unsafe. Logos, the principle of logic, immediately builds walls. He rationalizes it's just a chemical reaction. He pulls back, "I need space." He acts indifferent. She's probably imagining things. Not because he's heartless, but because Eros has made him feel out of control. Jung wrote, "We do not love, we are carried by love." When the two principles harmonize, love becomes a path of maturity. Only when a man stops running from eros and stops letting logos dominate without feeling can he truly love as a mature soul. At that point, he no longer denies emotions but also doesn't drown in them. He confronts his fears without letting them drive his actions. He no longer sees love as a destination but as a sacred journey back to the true self. This is the stage of individuation Jung described, where love is not just connection with another, but the gateway to meeting the deepest unlived parts of the self. Healing suggestion for women: don't judge, just observe. If you're with a man who seems distant and unpredictable, don't jump to conclusions. He may be caught between rising eros, resisting logos, and a soul in disarray. Your role is not to rescue him, but to stay centered, authentic, and refrain from labels. Ask yourself, could this be an archetypal reaction surfacing? Is he struggling with his inner image of the feminine through me? You, if present, quiet, and luminous enough, might be the very mirror that awakens his journey. Special case when a man is with one woman, but the lover awakens for another. This is dangerous ground, but also what Jung called the land between light and shadow. A man might be in a stable relationship, yet one day eros awakens through someone else, and suddenly he feels alive again. The question isn't will he leave one for the other, but rather what archetypal image just awakened in him, and is he mature enough to transform it into inner growth rather than destroy his reality? Have you ever witnessed or experienced this? Have you ever been shaken by a glance, a conversation, a dream that awakened something so deep you couldn't name it even while already in a relationship? Share your experience. There is no right or wrong here, only deep truth in a community quiet enough to truly listen. In the next part, we will enter the shadow of archetypal love. Why does deeper love make a man more afraid of being seen? Why do jealousy, pain, and withdrawal arise when true connection begins? Why does love not only bring light, but also reflect the parts of us we fear to face? When shadow turns into light, shadow individuation and love is a calling. To love is to become vulnerable to the part of the soul that was never touched before. C.G. Jung, The Red Book. We often think of love as light, that when two people find each other, everything becomes clear, easy, and perfect. But Jung thought otherwise. In the Red Book, he describes love not as fulfillment, but as a summons, a calling forth of the darkness within the soul. And from there, a journey begins. Shadow appears not to divide, but to lead. When a man truly loves, he doesn't just offer his light, he is suddenly confronted by his shadow weakness, wounds, aggression, the parts he's hidden all his life. The shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door whose painful constriction no one is spared. Bahrain, fear of abandonment, feelings of inadequacy, memories of a distant father or an over-controlling mother, they all flood back. And this is why a man who truly loves may suddenly pull away or behave strangely. Individuation, love as a journey of maturity. Jung called the process of personal evolution individuation, where the ego integrates with the unconscious to reach the self, the whole complete being. In love, when he looks at you with deeper eyes, it's not just desire, it's a contemplation of the anima within you. When he remembers details you forgot, it's not just attentiveness, it's psychic memory where your essence lives in his unconscious. When he protects you without being asked, it's not just masculinity, it's the guardian archetype awakening. These acts don't come from training. They're results of an inner war between the collapsing old self and the new self being born. Eros and logos in conflict, and it's never easy. Eros, the principle of connection emotion. Logos, the principle of order logic. In love, Eros rises and logos falters. He feels overwhelming joy and a desire to run away. Not because he doesn't love you, but because he's not used to being led by feeling. When Eros overwhelms logos, he becomes inconsistent, close yet distant, shows up just when you need him, then disappears for 3 days. This tension isn't a bad sign. It's the breakdown of the old ego. If both partners stay conscious, this moment becomes sacred for transformation. Shadow plus individuation, soul-transforming love. Archetypal love doesn't just make a man act differently, it makes him become someone new. He faces childhood wounds so he won't hurt you. He learns to express emotions even if he was raised to never show weakness. He begins to dream more because the unconscious is now speaking to him. And that's when love becomes a mirror of the self where he sees himself. More truly than ever before, I must learn that the dregs of my thought, my darkest feelings, also have the right to exist. The Red Book. Story when shadow was the gift. Elena once loved a man who seemed emotionally unavailable. He disappeared right when their connection deepened. 3 weeks later, he came back not with flowers but with a dream. He said, "I dreamed you were falling into a dark well. I was standing at the edge, but I didn't dare jump in. I was afraid I'd fall too." Elena understood. It wasn't that he didn't love her. He just wasn't ready to face the shadow within himself. But that dream, that confession, was the first sign that he had entered the journey of individuation. Has your relationship ever forced you to face your own shadow? Have you ever felt tested but deep down awakened? Share below. What part of love made you feel you were changing? Is there an archetype rising within you or within him? Your comment may be the guiding light for someone else. Keep going with me, because in the end, as Jung once wrote, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. True love doesn't just bond two people. It transforms both into deeper, truer versions of themselves. When love doesn't return the darkness of separation and the journey back to the self, there is a quiet pain few dare to name: loving someone who does not love you back, or loving someone whom a deeper part of you already knows is not the one. Archetypal love doesn't just reveal your true essence, it also exposes the wounds you've never healed. And when such a connection breaks, it's not just the end of a relationship. It can feel like a rupture in your very process of individuation. When the archetypal bond is misaligned, the self splits. Carl Jung once wrote in Psychological Types, "Every time we attach a wrong image to the mind, the unconscious creates a crisis to pull us back to the true path." Loving the wrong person isn't just emotional pain, it's a conflict between the ego and the self. When we channel our psychic energy into the wrong archetype, for example, falling for someone who only reflects the abandoning father or the hero we desperately want to impress, what we're actually doing is projecting old fears onto a new form. The result, the self, the most whole part of you, gets buried, replaced by wounded illusions. The woman's shadow, loving without being loved back. A woman's shadow doesn't always scream or demand. Sometimes it shows up as prolonged silence, overgiving, or denying her own worth. When a woman loves but isn't loved in return, these common shadows often surface. The abandoned child, "I'm not good enough to be chosen." The saving mother, "If I love him enough, he'll change." The self-deceiver, "Maybe I'm just too sensitive." And the most painful of all, you begin to doubt your intuition, even though your soul already whispered, "He's not really staying." The cost of not healing love becomes a repeating loop. Without awareness of our archetypes and shadows, we repeat the same emotional story, just with different faces. The man changes, but the wound of being left feels exactly the same. The setting shifts, but the uncertainty, confusion, and emotional scarcity remain. Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This is why he emphasized understanding the unconscious images we're drawn to is the key to emotional freedom. The healing journey, returning to the self through the shadow. Healing doesn't begin by cutting him off. It begins by recognizing you're reliving an image, a projection. 4 Jungian steps to heal after loving the wrong archetype. Identify the projection. Was he truly the one you loved, or just a mirror of an absent father, past abandonment? Dialogue with the shadow. Write a letter to your inner abandoned one or not good enough self. Ask her, "What do you need?" Reconnect with the self through symbols. Find an image that represents your healed essence: a flowing river, a woman standing tall in a storm, a glowing forest. Practice active imagination. Visualize a dialogue with the dream figure or inner part that was hurt. This is how Jung reconciled inner conflicts, through living imagination. A story that ended, but opened a new horizon. Sophie loved a man for 6 years. He never committed, but always returned just as she was ready to leave. One night she dreamed she walked into an abandoned house. There the man sat, faceless, in shadow. Sophie woke up and for the first time asked herself, "Am I in love with him or with rejection itself?" From that day forward, she stopped blaming him. Instead, she began her return journey to the self. She studied depth psychology, entered therapy, and for the first time in her life felt peace. Have you ever loved someone only to later realize it wasn't real love, but an old image from your past? Have you ever felt unseen, not because you weren't enough, but because the other person simply couldn't see? Share your story or a dream you once had, or a symbol that stayed with you in the comments below. We are building a community where love is no longer repetitive wounding, but a doorway back to the self. In the final part coming next, we'll complete this Jungian journey. How can you recognize soul-depth love from the very beginning? How do you stay connected to yourself even while deeply in love? And what happens when both partners enter love as a healing ritual? Come with me to the end because the answers don't lie in logic, but in the very experience you've been carrying all along. In the end, love begins with a glimpse into the soul. In the darkness of the unconscious, there are things we've never dared to name: feeling, spirit, and the longing to be truly seen. But it's exactly there, Carl Jung said, where light first begins to seep in, when we're finally ready to return, not to find someone who loves us, but to ask, who am I when I love? We've traveled a long path together, from invisible signs of true love to the language of archetypes and the silent voice of the shadow. But let this not be an ending. Let it be a threshold where you stand before the mirror and gently ask, have I ever truly dared to love with my soul? True love doesn't hide in words. It lives in a gaze that lingers a second longer, in a presence that needs no explanation, in the way a man remembers a detail you once said because his soul has etched it into him. It's the simultaneous presence of two unconscious minds where there is no strategy, only raw authenticity. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. C.G. Jung. So tell me, have you ever been seen like that? Not through eyes that seek to possess, but through eyes that long to understand. How to recognize a soul-born love. You don't need to study 1,000 techniques to spot the right person. You just need to return to your inner world and learn to trust your own signals. Try these two gentle actions. They may shift your entire experience of love. Signal journal. Each day, write down one gaze, one phrase, one small gesture that made you feel truly seen. Then ask yourself, where in me did that feeling arise? Active imagination practice. Tonight, sit quietly and imagine you enter a space where you are loved without needing to prove anything. Who appears there? Speak aloud the words you've never dared to say. Then, listen for their response. This isn't just a psychology exercise, it's a sacred reunion with the self you've forgotten in the rush of seeking love. If you once loved the wrong person, know this: you were not wrong. You were simply passing through a layer of ego on your way to something deeper. The most authentic version of yourself where no one else has the power to make you feel incomplete. True love, as Jung said, doesn't come to fill you. It comes to illuminate the parts of you that were not yet whole. Whether it was heartbreak or rising joy, every emotion you've ever felt carried a message from your unconscious. Don't pass through each other's lives without leaving light behind. If you've ever had a moment, even just 1 second, where a man looked at you not with avoidance, not with judgment, but as if he had truly seen your soul, share it in the comments. Not to hold on to the past, but to show others that this kind of love is real. Share in comments a moment when you felt a man truly saw your soul. This isn't just a video, this is a community. If you've made it this far, perhaps you weren't just watching YouTube. Perhaps you were searching for something sacred. Love without performance. Connection without defense. A space where you're allowed to just be you. Click subscribe, not for the algorithm, but because something here speaks the language your heart still hears in silence. And finally, don't forget, when you learn to see truth in someone else's gaze, you're also learning how to look at yourself with unconditional love. Real love doesn't begin when two people say, I love you. It begins when they no longer need to say it at all.